All right, welcome everyone to another edition of our Data Resilience SpectrumCast. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Randy Arsenault and our two subject matter experts, Trisha Jang and Sean Sperry. And this week we have a lovely co-guest, Phoummala Schmitt. Phoummala, welcome to SpectrumCast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while since we've seen each other physically, but virtually, right? This is
Yes,
great.
All hail the goddess of exchange.
Oh,
there we
thank
go.
you. Yeah,
That is her
especially
actual
right now,
professional
right?
moniker. So,
So
I'm
this
not
week we're
making that
going
up.
to have a conversation about Spectrum Protect Plus release 10.17, which is now, and why we have Phoummala here, available on Microsoft Azure
Marketplace.
in the
Azure
marketplace.
Azure Marketplace.
That
Yes, the
In the Azure Marketplace, and talk a little bit about the functionality and the reasons for protecting information in the cloud. But before we do that, Phoummala, why don't you give us a quick rundown of who you are, what you're doing, and that sort of thing?
I'm Phoummala Schmitt, also known as Exchange Goddess out there in the Twitters. I am a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, and we are within the developer relations organization. So, as a cloud advocate, I am pretty much that middle person between the customer and the product group. So, we advocate for the customer, but we also advocate for the product group as well, helping to make sure that we are making the best product for our customers.
Very
That's
good.
in summary of what an advocate
Have a meet in
does,
the
right?
middle somewhere.
Yeah, because we do presentations, demos. We some people say we're influencers, but I would say that we're advocates, right? Because we advocate for the customer, but then we also we advocate for the product group too. So we're like that middle person that says, hey, here's this product, how can we make this product better? And in my case, it's Azure.
Yeah, I think for like all of us, right, jack of all trades, and in some cases, Exchange got us master of one or master of none.
Master of some.
There we go.
that's all we can really hope for is to be master of some. I think
Of
that's
something.
our aspirational goal.
So this is the Data Resilience podcast. So Paul, let's start with you, since you are our guest. And from your perspective, are you hearing more about data resilience, especially as it pertains to the cloud? And if so, what are kind of your thoughts about it, especially since you deal a lot with clients?
So right now, yes, data resilience is hot on everybody's mind. It is, well, from a disaster recovery standpoint when you go to cloud, but also, malware, ransomware. So many things have happened in the past 18, 24 months that customers are pretty much going, okay, it's not just going to the cloud and moving our infrastructure and our data there, but what are we going to do when we're there and protect our data? Like, how do we do this? Because ultimately, it's our data, and they're finding out that service providers only provide a certain level of services, right? We're not backing up your data. If there's a disaster, we do not show up with a truck full of backup tapes for you. We provide high availability. We provide you the tools and the services to secure and maintain and protect your data, but we ultimately don't invoke those actions. So you have to do that, and customers are realizing this now that, oh wow, that's important, isn't it?
So you're busting the urban myth that there's a truckload of tapes that are going to show up from that cold storage if I have a disaster with my
What do you people have against
that are running
truckload?
out on Azure.
I love trucks of tapes.
Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm talking about. Like I miss those.
I love
days.
trucks
I know
of
that's
tapes.
nostalgic, but it's
Yeah, but we are breaking that myth because it is a myth. Ultimately, when you go to the cloud, it's a shared responsibility, right? As a service provider, regardless of who the cloud provider is, they're providing you a service. They're providing you those tools, and there's certain things that we will do as a service provider, but then ultimately you've got some responsibilities too as a customer, regarding your data, your particular infrastructure that you're deploying. So taking that shared responsibility pretty much puts both our hands in the cookie jar and saying, okay, we're both responsible for this, but ultimately as the customer, you've got to know what you have to do to make sure that your business is, what's the word? Continuing, right? In the event of a disaster, what are you going to do? We're going to provide you XYZ, but it only goes so far.
Yeah, and I think that's really the risk with the cloud. I mean, as a system administrator, right? I really want to think that I'm going to press this button and kind of turn my world over to Microsoft, right? And they're going to handle it all for me, and I'm not going to have to worry about anything, quote, anymore. And that's kind of what people thought at the beginning of the cloud era, I think.
That was the unicorn, right? That was the unicorn that flew into your conference rooms and said, do it. This is great. And, there's going to be puppy dogs and flowers everywhere. It's going to be fabulous.
Yeah. And I think the reality is
time.
It was as it usually is, right? And I think the reality is, now it's become quite a sophisticated offering. The complexity, because the number of features and functions that you have available have gotten bigger and larger, the complexity has gone up a lot. And people have also learned, right, that, yes, there is some certain functions and features and Microsoft is enhancing value on it, taking over, but there are certain things that you still have to do for yourself.
Yeah. And I think cloud, from the context of this discussion, cloud has, I think maybe to a lesser degree now, but especially early on kind of blurred the distinction between high availability and disaster recovery. I mean, the cloud is inherently highly available because you've got multi-zone and, geographically dispersed data protection and things of that nature. It is, however, not any less prone to disasters and the recovery therefrom. If anything, it might be more. So it's really important to keep that distinction clear, I think.
I don't know. Is it less prone to disaster? I mean, is it?
Yeah, maybe it isn't. I mean,
theoretically, Microsoft can manage Microsoft technology better than I can, right? They're hiring the best engineers. They understand it better than I can. They can hire more people.
But they can't send that meteor off course if it's heading for the moon, right? So in the event of some huge disaster,
everyone's saying, Bill Gates is injecting us with microchips. So you never know. I mean, we could tell
not
that.
Me. I haven't been vaccinated yet, so I'm not chipped yet.
You're not being followed.
Right.
But I think that brings up a good point of when you talk about we have to be responsible for the data that's in the cloud, there's different types of disasters. So do I have to worry about your hardware failure? Or do I need to worry about viruses, or do I just need to worry about corruption to my database?
Well,
I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's because it's about your data, and you are responsible for the safekeeping and retention and safeguards of your data. Because when something happens to your business, your customers aren't going to go to Microsoft; they're going to come to you. You are responsible to know, okay, what is my SLA with my cloud provider? What are they responsible for? And what am I responsible for? You can't go into this blindly and thinking, here you go. I just migrated everything. Have at it. When you're on premises, you're responsible for all that. All we're doing is we're taking a lot of that legwork, that capital, that investment that you made into your hardware. We're just pretty much taking that away from you. Now it's an OpEx cost rather than a CapEx, but you're still responsible for those databases. You're still responsible for that application and making sure that your secretary or your admin can still print and the data that she's printing is protected. Yeah. Because printing is number one.
Yeah, absolutely. The data centers, the big cloud data centers, and certainly Microsoft falls into this category, are, hardened facilities. They're designed to withstand a lot of potential abuse and disruptions of power or, any number of weird events, right? So they are designed to mitigate risk and reduce the vulnerability of those kind of things, but it's not impossible. I mean, we've been talking about that kind of giant data center fire, the OHV data center fire.
Yes.
As a prime example, which took down their entire network. So it was one data center that had a huge catastrophe, but it disrupted their entire customer base for a non-trivial amount of time. So I guess you can't take for granted that you are inherently necessarily more protected just because you've pushed your workloads into the cloud. You still have to be ready to recover from a disaster.
Well, that's just it, right? Most organizations are like, okay, I've got my business continuity plan for on premises, but do I still have to do that with the cloud? Yeah, you still have to do that when you're in the cloud. You should still do your DR tests, your BCDR tests, still run them.
You're speaking Sean and Trisha's language now. Test.
What's the point of having backups and that disaster recover if you actually don't go through the process of recovering that data to make sure that what you're backing up actually works?
It's I have for you is how do you see people using the Azure cloud? Are they using it as a destination for their on-site backups? Are they using it to run their backup servers in the cloud? Or are they just protecting the applications that are up there and that's all they're using it for?
Honestly, it's a combination of everything because we have so many services. If you ask me if I can name all of them, I'd say no. I can't name all our, so we have hundreds of services and more keep coming online. So we have a mix of what customers are doing. Some are just using Azure as a repository for their backups, right? They're snapshotting their VMs on premises and they're just dumping it here in their blob storage. Some are running applications, exclusively in the cloud. Some are completely, their whole environment is all in Azure and M365. And then others are hybrid, where it's a combination of, okay, I've got some, on premises servers, and then I have some in the cloud, in Azure running as well. And it's like this combination of workloads and functions going on.
And that combination feeds into what Randy and Sean were talking about, where we've really got to test to make sure
yes.
I'm being able to bring those copies back. And maybe I do still need a local copy out on tape or something since
and I mean,
Unicorn is not bringing me tapes.
Yeah, yes.
Now that would be cool.
Unicorn.
I would sign up for that if they had like a branded unicorn that flew in with the satchel of tapes. So, so we're talking about hybrid multi-cloud, which is where obviously the industry is moving aggressively and we're playing a role. Microsoft is there. And as, the Apex cloud providers like Microsoft, like Google, like AWS, like IBM now with Satellite are planting that infrastructure as well on premises. So now you've got this kind of integrated data pipeline and information pipeline from the edge all the way into the big data center. So again, I think we have to be careful not to have a false sense of security that because we've got this very cloudy, seamless agile infrastructure end to end, that our protection level is inherently higher. We still have to make sure we have, DR planning and testing. We still have to make sure that we have, complete stewardship and sovereignty of our data. So those things don't go away. I guess that's the
what I'd like to do is maybe bring it back to Phoummala. You started talking about this, and then I think you re-emphasized the point about the number of services. So if we tie that to the new Spectrum Protect Plus offering in the Azure Marketplace, first of all, from your perspective, right, there are so many offerings, not only from Microsoft, but the fact that all of these cloud providers have a marketplace that allow folks, different vendors, to be able to support different technologies that many different types of customers might be running on-prem in order to say, hey, come use me, right? I support your application, right? Do you think that makes things more complex or simpler? This whole notion of choice. What's your thought there?
Options. Options are good. Having options gives you the flexibility to run your business the way your industry is going, right? Let's say healthcare. It doesn't evolve as fast as, let's say, software or some other industries. So when you have options available, you have to be able to quickly adapt and, dare I say the word, agile, but you do, right? Businesses change. And if you're not ready to change with it, you're kind of stuck. So when we provide you options, it gives you that ability to be flexible and say, okay, we tried this, it didn't work. Let's try this avenue now. Let's try this other software. It gives you flexibility, but in a way, it does also complex things a little bit too. When you've got so many different types of services running, but that's where it comes down to governance as well, knowing what you're actually running in your environment. Governance, cost management, guardrails, all those good things come into play then. So you're not just spinning stuff up, then you have service sprawl.
Yeah. And service sprawl too, right? Which is an issue, which is probably good for cloud providers, but maybe not necessarily for end users.
Not going to say anything.
Yeah, well, that's fair. That's fair.
Actually good, but it's good and bad, right? Like people could say it's good for Microsoft because people are just spinning stuff up, but but not really, because that's our reputation. That's the integrity of, that's customers are going to be like, well, you just let us spin this up.
Well, yeah. Well, one of the things
why didn't you protect us? I just spent $200,000 this month. I didn't need to.
One of the things that I think Microsoft has done really well, and Microsoft is really unique in this whole industry, this thing we're talking about, this service sphere that we're talking about, in that Microsoft came from the desktop. It didn't originate in the cloud. It didn't originate in the corporate data center. It literally came from the desktop and grew into a full stack end-to-end solution. So I think that gives Microsoft a very unique perspective and a unique kind of architectural paradigm and design pattern that really, I would argue, nobody else really has. I think we're all trying to build it. I think we're all trying to catch up to it. But I think Microsoft has done a very good job of creating that ecosystem that sits on my desktop. I mean, I'm an Office 365 user. I have it on all my far too many computers, and it's awesome because I know I can just run it anywhere. I can use OneDrive. It's completely seamless. I do still back it up though, because, I'm paranoid, but it makes it much easier.
Okay, so
and now think about scaling that to, the US government or a huge, Fortune 100 corporation. So that creates a whole different set of requirements and demands and challenges. But again, I think Microsoft has done a uniquely good job of kind of creating that integrated value chain, I would say.
I agree with you on that. And not just because I work for Microsoft, but even before I joined, we are the enterprise space, right? Like you said, we started in the desktop. Businesses, the majority of businesses use Windows. I mean, yes, Macs are great, but most people use Windows, and that's where everything started. And you've got the servers and everything else, all these services, and it's the same thing with Azure. We have so many services. It just provides you these options for your business to grow the way you need it to grow to make money. Just kind of, right? Ultimately, we're all in the business to make money.
We're not running charities. Yes, correct.
So Tricia, turning back to Spectrum Protect Plus. So you've recently spent a lot of time with the software and actually helped record some of the demonstrations for how to take advantage of Spectrum Protect Plus in the Azure Marketplace. Anything you want to share there?
Yeah, I really like how in the marketplace you can easily deploy either an entire Spectrum Protect Plus the vSnap into the Azure, or you can do a hybrid approach where you have your Spectrum Protect Plus server on site and just the vSnap sitting out there. And in addition to this new offering that came out earlier this month, we also have a lot of other great videos out there that talk about how, for instance, you can use Spectrum Protect or Spectrum Protect Plus and send your backups, use that as a storage pool out in Azure, or how we can back up your Microsoft 365, your Office 365 solutions using Spectrum Protect Plus.
Yeah, that was going to actually be my next question, Phoummala. Your Exchange goddess reputation is now going to start to catch up to you. So one of the things Spectrum Protect Plus started to support a few releases ago is Microsoft 365, all the way back when it was called Office 365.
I can't keep up with the name changes, to be honest with you. I still call it Office 365.
I think a lot of folks would say, well, if I'm going to turn my Exchange process or my mail process over to Microsoft, they're going to take care of it end to end, right? And I think before you were saying that's not necessarily the case.
No, it's not. We do not back up your emails. We do not back up your emails. We provide you tools such as the retention settings to maintain what's in your mailboxes. There are specific settings that you can apply that holds a mailbox for X amount of days after the user has left, but there's nobody running in the data center hitting, putting tapes in and backing up Office 365. That does not happen. So if you are running Exchange Online and you've got mailboxes out there, if your business requirements require you to have point in time recovery, then what we are providing is not sufficient.
Is there
what
any
we do is we
business
give you
that
everything in
doesn't-
the mailbox, right? But if you need to have what was in the mailbox January 20th, 2020, we can't give that. Like, we can say, here's what's all in it, but we can't say this point in time, this specific day, this is what was in it. We can't do that. We just don't, because we don't back up. But if you're backing up, you can recover the tape, export it out and give that to your lawyers and say, okay, January 20th, 2020, here's what was in the mailbox at that time.
Is there any business that doesn't need point in time recovery?
Businesses that have in their policy, their governance plan in their policy, it says we do not back up any emails. There are some that, and I think there's one really, really big one with a couple letter acronyms that they actually do not back up emails at all. They don't keep anything. Like, their retention policy is like really short. But yeah, and a prior company that I worked for, our policy is we don't back up emails. So that kind of takes that responsibility away. Like, oh, we don't keep any emails.
It seems like that'd be very difficult to get away with in this current litigious and compliance environment.
Well, so if your policy states you don't back up email, that's what your policy states. So you can't present any, like, you can present what's in the mailbox at this current date. So you can't go back to a backup tape because your policy states you don't backup tape. So you do take that risk of, with that litigation, if the judge is going to be like, well, that sucks to be you, that's going to hurt your case because you can't provide the email. It is a risk that some organizations do take. I worked in one that we did not back up emails. We did do multiple copies of our databases and then the lag database. It gave us, I believe it was 15 days that we set that for. But that 15 days and then the 4 copies, that requires a massive amount of storage. Massive, especially if you're replicating that to multiple data centers. And yes, you can run Exchange on cheap storage. You in theory, you can run it on SATA drives, right? But when it's just going to take a lot of drives because it's all about IOPS. If you don't have enough IOPS to maintain a certain performance level for those mailboxes, email will be slow, searching will be slow. That's all I can say.
Taking us down a crazy road. We're talking about performance. Sean, I noticed before you're trying to say something and you were on mute.
I was just going to say that is, and it was very popular a few years ago, a legal strategy of I just do not back up emails, period. Right?
Yeah,
because that way, if somebody, serves you with a legal request for this particular point in time, it's like, well, sorry, I don't have it. Right. So, now, I guess it depends on the country whether that whole strategy would be legal or not. Right. Whether there's a law that says I have to back up emails or not. But in the United States, at least, I don't think there is such a requirement.
I don't think so either. And I think our legal system is, there's a lot to it. Yeah.
Well, GDPR, I mean, if you look at just about any industry compliance, news stream, GDPR is driving a lot of change here, right? So
yes,
government agencies and private industry and commercial businesses, public businesses are basically preparing to adopt very similar guidelines. So,
yeah. Team, thank you very much. This has been a good conversation around protecting information in your environment, especially when that environment includes the cloud. Tricia, I'll turn to you. What is your tooltip for this week?
It's Trisha's tool time.
Trisha's tooltip.
Okay, so today's tooltip actually goes way back, and it started when Spectrum Protect was first invented or developed, and it was called ADSM. And at that time, we didn't have LinkedIn or Facebook. So a lot of the technical folks either administrators or business partners and even IBMers and even our developers went out and created this adsm.org, where there's tons of discussion on all types of issues surrounding Spectrum Protect. So check out adsm.org. You can sign up. You can use it to search if you're having questions about almost anything to do with data resilience with Spectrum Protect, Spectrum Protect Plus.
Great, thanks for that, and very helpful tip for folks who are Protect or Protect Plus users. And as always, Randy, once a week we try to talk about something that's in the news, and I think we have something that's fairly relevant to even cloud-based protection, right?
Yeah, I think so. So we actually, kind of touched upon it earlier, and it was a pretty big story in the news. I think it was last week, right? So there was a big data center, OVH, which is a large cloud provider in Europe, had one of their data centers, I believe in Germany, if I'm not mistaken, kind of catch on fire, which was a big deal. And it was a pretty horrible, very destructive fire. Like, it was hard down, the whole facility was destroyed. And not only did it affect, obviously, the services coming out of that data center, but it took down their entire network. It actually impacted other data centers on their grid. And was a huge outage for all of their customers. So it was a pretty bold or a pretty high visibility example of where, this kind of a problem can occur and can result in some fairly catastrophic impact on your client base, regardless of how well protected you think you might be.
Which really brings back to the point that you want to be able to make sure you're protecting your information no matter where it lives, because Phoummala, as you said, right, it's your data,
Yes.
and it's your business. What would you do with it? If it was on-prem, it's probably going to be the same thing you're going to want to make sure you're doing with it, or the same SLAs you have with it, no matter where it lives, even if it is in the cloud. So great. Well, everyone, thank you very much. It was a great conversation. Phoummala, thank you again very much for participating in our SpectrumCast.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Great.
Well, let's do it again. You have a standing invite. Come back anytime you want.
Yes, we definitely do this again.
Great.
Cool.
All right, everyone. I want to say thank you again, and until next time.